Okay, hello and welcome to our audience members joining us from across the globe. I'm Raymond Karam, the Chief Program and Development Officer here at the Arab Gulf States Institute. We're happy to have you all with us for this discussion examining the Strategic Mutual Defense Agreement signed between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan on September 17th. We have a truly exceptional panel of experts joining us today. I'll introduce them briefly here and share a link to their full bios in the chat. First, a welcome to Professor Feroz Khan, who is currently a research professor at the Institute of Regional and International Security at the U.S. Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, California. He is a former brigadier in the Pakistani Army and served as Director of Arms Control and Disarmament Affairs in Pakistan's Strategic Plans Division, Joint Services Headquarters. He was a key contributor in formulating Pakistan's security policies on nuclear and conventional arms control and strategic stability in South Asia, and produced recommendations for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and represented Pakistan in several multilateral and bilateral arms control negotiations on peace and security in South Asia and international treaties related to weapons of mass destruction. A quick disclaimer that Professor Khan is participating here in his own personal capacity and is not speaking on behalf of either the US or Pakistani government. And welcome back to Dr. Abdulaziz Sagar. He is the chairman and founder of the Gulf Research Center. He is also the president of Sagar Group Holding in Saudi Arabia, which is active in the fields of information technology, aviation services, and investments. Dr. Sagar is a member of the Mecca Province Council and serves on the advisory board to various organizations. He has a special interest in Gulf strategic issues and is a regular contributor and commentator in international and regional media. Moderating the session today is my colleague Hussein Ibish. He is a senior resident scholar at AGSI, a weekly columnist for The National, and a regular contributor to The Atlantic and frequent contributor to many other US and Middle Eastern publications. And with that, Hussein, over to you.
Thank you, Raymond. Welcome to everybody wherever you are, enjoying our next and maybe one of our more interesting AGSI webinars here. We're looking at the meaning and the deep history of the new Saudi-Pakistani Mutual Defense Pact that was signed on September 17th in Riyadh by Saudi Crown Prince and Prime Minister Mohammed bin Salman and the Pakistani Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif in Riyadh. And it came in the immediate context of the Israeli strike on Qatar, but as both sides have noted, was years, if not decades in the making. Saudi Arabia and Pakistan have had a close relationship, including strategic and security relationship, since the 1940s that has been growing over the decades. And I thought I'd begin by asking both of our guests to comment on their point of view and the point of view of their countries, Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, even though they speak entirely in their private capacities, how they view the history that led to this remarkable and perhaps game-changing agreement, although we'll also talk about what exactly it does and does not mean. The precise text has not been made public to my awareness, so we will have to talk about that as well. Let me begin by asking Dr. Sagar first, from a Saudi point of view, about the history that brought us to the point of the September 17 agreement with Pakistan.
Well, Feroz, good afternoon, good evening. It depends wherever our audience is. Let me start by saying that Saudi Arabia and Pakistan have enjoyed a very long historical relation since the independence of Pakistan in 1947. Saudi was one of the first countries to recognize Pakistan independence, and since then had always a great support and endorsement. Pakistan is a majority Muslim, and they have a lot of attachment and a lot of feeling towards Saudi Arabia. This period is between 1947 up to 1960. In 56, when there was a tension between Pakistan and India, Saudi also stand with Pakistan in support and endorsing, supporting whatever was able to do at that time. But the relation, went on and, carried away until I would say the special period, 67, we have signed an agreement, defense cooperation agreement between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. But then also after that, until the early 70s, also it was continuing. But 77, we moved into another era. Between 1980 and 2011, that was also another interesting period between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia. When the Iranian Revolution came and there was a security threat on the region, Pakistan did contribute with a lot of armed forces, personnel to be present in Saudi Arabia. As you know, Saudi Arabia is a huge and a big country, and we have the strongest relation to Pakistan. So there was a lot of strong presence from Pakistan, not only as soldiers and boots on the ground, but also instructor, pilot, intelligence sharing, training. Many of those issues have taken place. In 88, I think Pakistan, after they start their demonstration of their nuclear capability, there was also some pressure. But Saudi also have contributed to the expansion of the Pakistan defense industry. I remember in 83, when Bofors from Sweden have signed an agreement with Pakistan to manufacture the RBS-70, the missiles at that time. And Saudi have always endorsed and support the Pakistan military industry. In 1990, when Iraq invaded Kuwait, also we had a lot of thousands of Pakistani soldiers, close to 11,000 of them. They were also in Saudi Arabia on the close border in a certain area in Saudi Arabia, but also ensuring the stability and the security of the region. I think, if you look at it until September 11th and Saudi, during the Soviet Union occupation in Afghanistan, also stood with Pakistan in support of the Pakistan at that time. Looking at the period, post that one, I think always the collaboration have always included air defense, air force, pilot, civil aviation, airports, land forces, navy. Thousands of Saudi officers and soldiers have been trained also in Pakistan. And I think both have enjoyed a good and a special relation to the United States, even during that time. So it was really a continuation of the good relation between both sides, also with the US. I would say 17 September 2025, the new framework agreement, I would call it, despite of the usage of the word of a strategic, this have came to 2021 understanding, and also additional agreement that was negotiated at that time to move it further from the one which started in 1967, and then in the 70s it was stronger. 82 we had also the agreement with them. We have always done a joint exercise with Pakistan, whether in land forces or navy, and we always had the training program. Even today we still have close to 2,500 Pakistani trainers in Saudi Arabia, contributing to our internal security and also to our defense security. This training has been extremely useful, helpful, and in support to the Saudi. But the whole aim between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan is to bring stability, security in the region, and not an escalation. And it was never meant to be directed against any other regional or but to add to the stability and the security of the region. And Pakistan also enjoyed an excellent relation to the rest of the Gulf countries. So that is the overall, I will put it. But if you look at, we still have about 2.2 million Pakistani or more even in Saudi Arabia. The trade relation is limited to less than 2 billion, while if you look at the neighbor, India is close to $20 billion, and we still have a similar number from India, close to 2 million. Indian also lives in Saudi Arabia. So Saudi have distanced itself a little bit from the Kashmir crisis, because Saudi thought, looking at that issue, they need to endorse always de-escalation rather than escalating any sort of situation there. I think it's a good framework and an agreement. Some people have interpreted that quite wrongly by thinking that this does include nuclear capability. I think Pakistan nuclear deterrent has been very clear in 1998 and in 2014, which was also endorsed by the US in 2024 with the clean bills of the performance of the Pakistan nuclear capability. It's not to be used for outside, but it is really an Indian-centric nuclear program because of the threat from next door. I think Saudi Arabia, we don't need to have any nuclear capability from Pakistan at this stage. The maximum we have today, we have with the Argentinian, a small reactor for research in medical and scientific basis. But Saudi is thinking in the future about this the small medium reactor. And I think this will be part of the discussion in the US in November when the Crown Prince visit will take place. But that's related to the AI and related to the data center that Saudi is thinking about it. So I think I wanted to say that, yes, it is a defense collaboration. It has a broader scope as a framework that goes from training to joint exercise, to sharing of intelligence, to cybersecurity, to many of those aspects and so, but it has no components really in the nuclear as some people have interpreted or thought about it there.
No,
I'll stop here.
I appreciate that very much. And yeah, just to let the audience know that you're referring to the planned visit by Crown Prince and Prime Minister Mohammed bin Salman to the United States, which is now scheduled for November 18th, as I understand it. And I just thought I'd let those in our audience who are not yet aware of this planned state visit understand what you're referring to there. Because some people are aware and some people are not aware yet. So,
just one additional point I will add here. When the Crown Prince met with the Prime Minister in Qatar after the Israeli attack in Qatar, I think both have discussed about the issue. So Saudi Arabia have thought we need to enhance our collaboration with our friends and to bring some additional capability. But that capability, that enhancement, it's not a replacement to the strong Saudi-US relation. And in no way that is inviting a Chinese or Russian to the security apparatus or the security arrangement in the region here. I think timing was important, was quite sensitive after the attack. And Saudi wanted to just exercise their option and right to have a stronger relation to a country and a friendly country and people that have enjoyed strong relations since the 40s.
We will discuss the question of strategic, options and all of those things a little later on. I'd like to bring Dr. Khan into the conversation and ask you the same question from a Pakistani point of view, the brief history. If you want to add anything, if you want to, sort of give it a Pakistani gloss. And also, not every request was honored. For example, Pakistan did not, just as Saudi Arabia has not involved itself in Kashmir, Pakistan did not contribute troops to the joint intervention in Yemen in 2015. So it is worth noting that there have been limitations to the cooperation based on the national interests of both countries, naturally. So I would like to ask you a similar question, Dr. Khan, if you can give us your interpretation of the buildup to the September 17th agreement.
First of all, thank you very much for inviting me. I think I will endorse everything my colleague Dr. Sagar has said, There's very little that I can add, and there is precisely hardly any difference of perceptions or the history that he has mentioned. So I will not go all over again what he has said. I'll 100% endorse what he has said. There are a couple of things that I just want to overlay that as to how the context really evolved,
Please.
In the 1950s, King Saud himself had mentioned something about the Pakistan, the newly independent state, mentioning to the effect that Pakistan, along with other Muslim countries, will be sort of the words to the effect that will be responsible for the protection of the holy sites in Makkah and Medina. And, as you mentioned, the 1967 agreement, not only that the Yemen crisis happened at that time, there was a crisis in Yemen, and Pakistan actually did contribute the forces at that time. That was the first
Yes.
outside involvement. And it included, actually dates back as to everything that he's mentioned, that Pakistan would be able to transport a sizable sort of force up to a brigade or even division strength at a certain point of time on the request of Saudi Arabia, if and when a situation of that kind arrives, Interestingly, what King Saud had said in the 1950s did actually happen in 1979, when the holy sites were actually done, and the Pakistanis did play an actual role. So there is a history of physical involvement of Pakistani forces on the Saudi soil, in addition to what my colleague had said, about 1991 agreement, etc. I think the 1982 agreement that came, which is the mutual defense agreement, and the protocols included in that, was a very significant development. And this is more of a really back off from additional to what was done at the time, because after that there is a headquarters called the Saudi-Pakistan Armed Forces Organization, SPAFO, as we call it. It's based in Saudi Arabia. About Pakistani Armed Brigade and 30,000 forces are there. So there is this element of everything that has been said, in addition to the training, jointness, exercises, and etc. Pakistan's critical problem is essentially, it's a country which has very insecure borders, vis-a-vis India, vis-a-vis Afghanistan. I think my colleague didn't mention the Afghan factor, which was a very, very important factor in his talk, and I wanted to bring that particular aspect as well. In the 1980s, not only that agreement was done but at that time, Pakistan was heavily involved with Soviet invasion in Afghanistan, and Saudi Arabia, United States, and Pakistan were really together in that war, which in terms is responsible for whatever happened subsequently within Pakistan and United States and Saudi Arabia leading up to 9/11. So there is this negative context in which the three countries were involved that led to 9/11 involvement, and thereafter the global war on terror that happened in Afghanistan. And that was a very different context of Saudi-Pakistan relation related to the Taliban, which in turn started affecting Pakistan relation, both with Iran and Pakistan during the period of, especially, the relationship with Iran's relation with Afghanistan, and Pakistan, Iran's friction over those issues. These were the underlying things, But I think my colleague is absolutely right that the arrangement between Pakistan is never specific to any particular threat. And we can talk about what the threat perception is in the subsequent question, but I wanted to add these elements in there. One more element that I wanted to add to this, and he's absolutely right about the nuclear component, And since you know my background, so I'm more familiar with that. A lot has been written in my book, Eating Grass, The Making of the Pakistani Bomb, on this issue. Maybe repeating that here. But I think the mid-70s, 1974, was a very important year for Pakistan and Saudi Arabia and many other Muslim countries when India conducted the test. And at that time was a famous Islamic Summit conference that happened in Pakistan. That Zulfikar Ali Bhutto he's the architect of Pakistan's nuclear program. And Faisal was a staunch supporter of Pakistan going that far. In fact, all Muslim countries, including were behind the Pakistan going in reaction to what had happened in the subcontinent, And it is, although there's no formal record, but it is a fact that Saudi Arabia not only politically supported, but actually financially supported Pakistan's nuclear program at critical junctions when Pakistan came under nuclear sanctions. And I think the people of Pakistan and the government of Pakistan has never forgotten that. My colleague mentioned the 1998. I was part of at that time, the nuclear test there. And I exactly know from inside, and now I can say that how the Saudis came to the rescue when the sanctions were placed on Pakistan in 1899 and 1999. It was worth about, giving subsidies on petroleum and not even granting them. These are the memories that the people of Pakistan will never remember. But I tell you that if there's any other country in the world, my colleague will bear with that, Pakistanis are very, very emotionally and ideologically involved on matters of Islamic OIC related, in particular with relation to Saudi Arabia. So I think it is very, very close to Saudi's security in the mind of the Pakistanis. And I don't think that they expect as level of reciprocity in terms of physical involvement of Saudi forces in Pakistan. And he's correctly said so. And we have noticed the Saudis shifting over the Kashmir issues. Pakistanis have noticed that. In the past, there used to be a different position. But it's understandable that Saudi Arabia is a sovereign state and it has its own strategic interests along, and the Pakistanis fully understand that. So, in having said that, we could discuss further, but I can tell you that Pakistan is in a very, very curious position. It's a South Asian countries, but it is also a country in Southwest Asia and Central Asia, and its location is such, and its ideological part, it sees itself as the arc of the Islamic crescent that starts from Morocco to Pakistan. That's a green arc. And it sees itself playing a critical role in terms of all Islamic contingencies where, it matters a lot to the Pakistanis about anything that happens in the Muslim world. That's very, very important for them.
Understood. I'd like to just let the audience know that the title of your book refers to a very famous quote from then Prime Minister Zulfikar al-Bhutto, that Pakistanis would eat grass if necessary in order to match India's nuclear threat with a deterrent of its own. I believe that's the correct interpretation of your title.
Yes.
So under the circumstances, and given that both of you agree that this does not involve either a desire on the part of Saudi Arabia nor an intention on the part of Pakistan to extend a nuclear umbrella over Saudi Arabia, that the way that, say, the United States does through NATO, or, to NATO signatory countries. What does it entail in terms of mutual defense? And I'll begin with you, Dr. Khan, from a Saudi point of view. What are the obligations that Saudi Arabia has taken on? If it's not that, what is it?
Well, I'll have Dr. Sagar answer specifically what's the Saudi perception about that. I
I will be asking him, I promise.
Yeah, that I mean, if you look into the Pakistani threat perception, each country has its own threat perception. When you have a defense agreement, every country has its own threat metrics. And each country, in this case, Saudi Arabia and Pakistan respectively, are involved in a regional security complex. There's a regional trade complex, there's a regional security complex. Saudi is part of a regional trade complex in GCC. It's a peculiar security environment that exists where Saudi Arabia lies in its own environment. And there are threat perceptions of Saudi Arabia, which Pakistan would share, but not necessarily share the way Saudi Arabians think. Similarly, the Pakistani threat perception, as you just heard, is not necessarily shared with the same intensity as Islamabad sees its threat vis-a-vis India and Afghanistan, or other threats, So we look into that. Where is that overlap in which the two countries look into those things? And that overlap exactly is in the area where Saudi's internal security threats, Saudi threat perception, where it is, what is Saudi's request and demand from Pakistan that they will be able to fulfill without compromising the strategic balance that they have made on this Indian subcontinent. Now, at the minimum, Pakistan expects Saudi Arabia's political support, diplomatic intervention in the end, if the Pakistanis have expended tremendous amount of their money, equipment, etc., given that it's in a state of war, literally. As we speak, Pakistan is in an active state of war, actually with both Afghanistan and India at the moment.
Yes.
India has actually not done ceasefire after the May event. It has just paused. And it threatens every day, and they're exchanging. So that is existing threat. Afghanistan, as we speak, just last week, Afghanistan was attacking across Pakistan border. There was a border between Afghanistan and Pakistan, and not 2 years ago, Iran, Pakistan was also exchanging each other's. So think about this. Saudi Arabia is not something that is not realizing what is going on here at the moment, but the intensity is felt by Pakistan. So in other words, the Pakistani security forces are deeply involved in internals, in Baluchistan insurgency, that is cross-border from Iran, cross-border from Afghanistan, TTP, ISK, and other forces, and of course with India, as you already know. So it has to configure deterrent forces for its own forces, and then spare enough forces to meet the Saudi requirement. They know that the Saudis have the pocket, the money, and the political clout compared much better than Pakistan to provide that. And I think that is one of the things that Pakistanis have assured themselves that, they can produce the level of forces that Saudis would want, and Saudis will always back them. At least they will not proactively be involved. So there's a lot of dependency in Pakistan in that part, with everything that, and it's going to enhance, because I think, particularly in the Air Force, in my view, the cooperation will increase, because Pakistan Air Force performance in the war has been seen by the whole world, and Saudis will be much interested in that, getting more modern equipment. The Pakistani forces will be there to train them, or as we speak, Saudi forces are there in Pakistan, all institutions, including the military academy training. Navy cooperation is going to go increase more and more with Saudi and Pakistani cooperation is going. So these two services will be there. And of course, the army will be always ready to reach Saudi Arabia. So this is the kind of cooperation they expect. I don't think the Pakistanis expect Saudi forces to be involved in any crisis with India. I think Pakistanis can deal with them on their own.
That makes sense. Dr. Sagar, how do you see it from your point of view, from Saudi Arabia's point of view?
First, I'm so happy to hear from Brigadier Khan what he said in all the good point about the Saudi and Pakistan relation, the historical approach, and the current situation. First, let me say that Saudi Arabia do not feel that we have a nuclear threat, because if you define what is the threat perception in Saudi Arabia, then you can define what sort of weapon system that we need, or what sort of defensive agreement or umbrella that we need to get. So we do not feel in Saudi Arabia, we are a signatory to NPT, we are against any nuclear expansion in the region. And we have never endorsed the non-peaceful nuclear program in Iran, and the missiles also program. We thought that if it's for a peaceful use, we are all in support of that in the region. Second, to be able to have a nuclear umbrella by any country, that country should have an access capacity. And that access capacity, we have seen it in the US, where the US have provided Japan, South Korea. They do have capability in Turkey, in UK, in Germany, in different places. But under Russian, we have seen it in, covering Belarus and so in certain area. But still, in my opinion, Pakistan is overstretched with the neighborhood problems that they have there, which is Afghanistan in one side, and also India on the other hand, Baluchistan on the other side. So, there is a serious, border issue, and the Pakistani army is overstretched. And he is right; they are in a standby case, as we have seen lately the development between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Yeah. Yes, Saudi will endorse and will fully support any Pakistani political effort for de-escalation and for political negotiation. We have endorsed always the negotiation between Pakistan and India that took place in the old days in Oman, and on the track 2 and the track 1.5, track 1 also in that. And when the last incident happened between India and Pakistan, Saudi, they were the first, to try to bring the two together and find a political solution there. From the collaboration side, I think if we look at the spectrum, as I said before, which is the exercise, the joint exercise that can be done, the training, the cybersecurity issue, the artificial intelligence also. Pakistan have a huge capability also on the electronics engineers and also in the IT side. They have close to 20,000 graduate engineers every year from the Pakistani university, because again, they're a big country with 230 million population. So they do have that human capacity that it is needed also and helpful for us here. Joint research program, joint defense collaboration in the industry. Whenever you want to go, Saudi has a target to reach up to 50% of their military requirement to be local content and to be manufactured here. And that's required a lot of engineering, a lot of technical support, a lot of know-how, to be there. So it's not only enough to sign the agreement with the outside. What do you need to train your own local people to be able to work in such things? So I think that's an enhancement, and that's enhancement to what has been already been embedded and agreed. It deals with, because every time you have a different threat perception, and that according to the threat perception, government tend to expand their own cooperation, their own agreement, their own demand, and they move forward to that one. 10 years ago, we never had the drone issues, or the anti-drone, or the laser-guided weapon, all these things. Now, it's all there that it is required for any defense capability that need to be used. But I think it's It has been very much welcomed in Saudi Arabia and in the Gulf countries, this agreement. It really sent the positive signal that, yes, we do have friends that we can count and they will step in and support. We hope we don't need to use them. And we understood, you're absolutely right when you mentioned the 2015 Pakistan Parliament were against sending any troops to the conflict in Yemen, and so with the joint forces. We respected that, decision and position on the Pakistani side. And at the same time, we think the ultimate aim of such an agreement is stability, is security, is to bring calmness in the region by having capable forces. He's absolutely right, the general, in the 1979 when the Haram Sharif, the Pakistani soldiers, they were there, they contributed to the internal security. We have the strongest agreement with them. So all of that, we have a history of a tried and proven strong relationship that we can count on it on the future.
Yeah, it is true that when Pakistan declined to join the forces in Yemen, it did not in any way damage or undermine relations between the countries. It was fine.
As we are speaking today, we still have 2,500 trainers from Pakistan in the Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Interior, and the State Security, and the different department, and they're doing excellent job.
Yeah. So what I wanted to turn to next is the question of naval cooperation, because Saudi Arabia and Pakistan share a common interest in the Indian Ocean region, the Indian Ocean Basin. If you can put it this way, it is a historic trading zone that has been active for well over 1,000 years in international trade. Even before we had the concept of international trade, it was actually happening. And it was happening to a very large extent between the subcontinent and the Arabian Peninsula across the Indian Ocean. Now this has become not just a trading question, but also a question of strategic choke points and of maritime security. So I'm wondering if I can ask both of you. I guess I'll start with Dr. Khan, because I was just hearing from Dr. Sagar. Professor Khan, if you can talk about Pakistan's perception of the relations with Saudi Arabia in terms of maritime security.
Absolutely. I mean, one thing we have to sort of also keep as an overarching understanding, I'm sure your audience also understand that Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and Israel, for that matter, all are allies of the United States, And particularly the R that you're mentioning about the maritime zone falls under the NAVCENT or CENTCOM of the US forces. So it's very important that everything that the two navies do or the two armed forces do actually is sort of complementary or is not in contradiction to the overall objective of CENTCOM related, cooperative arrangements, And the Pakistani maritime forces under, CTF Task Force 150, and anti-piracy, anti-terrorism has been proactively involved. And now lately there are different arrangements that are being done, In addition to a large number of maritime exercises that Saudi Arabia and Pakistanis regularly do in this process, So it is in the overarching umbrella of the interest of US interest in this particular part in the region, including staunch coordination with the US Fifth Fleet in Bahrain. So this is the whole area under which the Pakistan Navy and in sort of an umbrella under which this cooperation will be happening in addition to the bilateral level, It is unclear because this area is kind of a disturbed, has been a sort of a disturbed area. And I think the more important factor is to ensure the flow from the two straits, which is extremely important for global economy and trade and energy supply routes, in addition to. Now, one element is there which is there, especially in the Red Sea area, where the Houthis have actually, involved into the maritime zone. And that's one area where there's a potential of cooperation, which I think would be there. I have my doubt that is there any other contingency in which Saudi Arabia and Pakistan navies will be involved directly. I will be very, very careful. I'm referring to any contingency vis-a-vis Iran. I think they'll be very, very careful because essentially Pakistan uses, as one of my colleagues actually used the term, when it comes to Islamic countries, they use very cautious neutrality. That's the Pakistani buzzword. But yes, the Pakistan Navy's capacity is increasing and increasing significantly over the next 10 years will be. In addition, thanks to the Chinese involvement that will be coming from China as well, that will enhance Pakistan's naval capacity. And I think Saudi Arabia will be advantageous to that. And again, as my colleague said in the beginning, it is not specific to any particular country or a regional threat, but it is specific to the nature of threat that it evolves there. And I just mentioned that this is one threat that is where Pakistani armed forces may be having a slightly different opinion. Now that I'm here, I just want to flag something about the 2015 and this agreement, you know. It is true that the Pakistanis did not involve in that 2015. It was primarily because they did not want to signal being on one side, you know, against it was against their whole that they want to be neutral in the case of Islamic contingencies. But I think this is my view, and I'm again saying personally here, I do not know whether the Pakistan government will agree with that. But if any future agreement, when it comes to the Houthis, elements of that kind, under this new agreement, it is my assessment and opinion, not a fact, that Pakistan would have a different position if a threat from Yemen or Houthis come on Saudi Arabia, either on the sea or on the land. Pakistan might be acting differently than what it acted in 2015.
You mean more proactively involved?
Proactively involved, if there's anything, on Saudi's request.
Yeah. Dr. Sager, what's your view about the naval angle here, especially in the Indian Ocean and the choke points, such as, for example, the Bab el-Mandab Strait that we were just talking about?
More than 90% of our export and import goes through maritime. So maritime security for us is an extremely essential, and naval collaboration, naval agreement, naval efforts to be put. Saudi, we do have 1,900 kilo in the Red Sea, and then we have also the Gulf side that we cover most of it. You see there. So that sort of collaboration, of course, will ensure the freedom and the free movement of trade and energy sources. Any threat, to Bab el-Mandab or to Strait of Hormuz or the movement toward the Indian Ocean, I think it's a threat to the global trade and the global economy. When you look at how much the Europeans have lost because of Bab el-Mandab, to have 6,500 kilo routing through Cape, and also to the insurance cost, the petrol cost, the everything cost, that's in billions of dollars. And if you look at country in the region like Egypt, that have clearly stated they have lost $9 billion a year because of that threat coming out of the Houthi. I think Houthi today, they're not just a threat to Saudi Arabia, but also they are a threat to the global economy, to the global trade. We still have 30% of the global container go through Bab el-Mandab. We still have close to 22% of the energy crossing through Bab el-Mandab. So all of that makes it extremely important for us and very, very priority. So cooperating on the naval side, on ensuring of naval security, for all of us is extremely important, including, of course, the U.S. and the Western country. Because if you move Strait of Hormuz, you go to Strait of Malaga. If you don't ensure that passage, you see, then again there will be a serious threat to all the country and all the neighborhood there.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, the Egyptian lira was badly damaged when the Houthis
very badly damaged, yes,
began their piracy, not just
and also the European country, because the
Europeans,
European,
of course. Yeah.
And by the way, today is not only the conventional, traditional maritime security threat. I think if you look at digital, that 17% of the world cable go through Bab el-Mandab that connect all the way from Shanghai to Rotterdam. That makes it extremely volatile. So an extremely important security dimension.
Certainly. No, I appreciate that. Before we turn to the written questions, I would like to ask both of you, and I'll ask Dr. Sagar to continue, and then we'll bring in Professor Khan, to talk about the American dimension, which Dr. Khan mentioned. He mentioned that this maritime security would have to be effectively an extension of the activities of U.S. Central Command Forward Headquarters is in Al Udeid in Qatar, but it is also very much out of the U.S. naval base in Bahrain and elsewhere. And the U.S. Military footprint in the region, which remains very strong. And even though there has been a perception that it is not used much these days because of an American unwillingness to act in response to events like the September 2019 bombing of Kek and Khores, or the Houthi attacks in January 2021 in Abu Dhabi, or the recent Israeli attack in Qatar, that nonetheless the American forces are not there for decoration, and they're not there just for pictures or for the Pentagon's budget, that there is a purpose. And so I'm wondering how you see, Dr. Sagar, the American role in this Saudi-Pakistani arrangement. Is it a complement? Is it a challenge? Is it moving in the direction of a multipolar world where strategic diversification remains an imperative for countries like Saudi Arabia that have no choice but to look for it? Or is it a complement? How do you see this, Dr. Sahar?
I think if I look at the old historical U.S. Gulf relation, or to Saudi Arabia when it started in the 40s with the oil, and so honestly, we used to believe the only boots in the ground and the only reliable source that we can count in terms of supply, security, providing that one was the U.S. Some issues started not only with the Houthi attack in Abu Dhabi and the Brigadier and Ras Al Khaimah. I think I'll go beyond just a little bit before, when President Obama said red line in Syria, and that red line have changed and that have allowed the Russian to be present in Syria, and then the attack on the tankers, and then the attack on the U.S. drone on the Iranian airspace, as the U.S. defined it at that time. All of these things, it raises the questions. Is the U.S. still the most reliable, strongest source for us that we count in, or they did it for a specific purpose? We understand when we have 40,000 troops and 4 frigate, 4 carrier in the region, they're not here to play golf or, so they are here for a special mission, and we understand that. But at the same time, the security architecture of the region was based in building our own capability and adding to it the U.S. presence, whether in Kuwait, the land force, or in Bahrain, the 5th Fleet, or in Udeid in Qatar. Yeah. And we were surprised because the Israeli part of the CENTCOM, and yet the Israeli attack in Qatar was not notified. Now, let's see, is the new arrangement between Bahrain and U.S. under the Abraham Accord, will that provide necessary security to Bahrain or not? Is the new executive order by the president to Qatar, will that provide the necessary, and for how long, and how can we institutionalize it and not just make it as an executive order? I think we need to find a good security framework architecture, because we remain a very strong alliance to the U.S. Our money is being deposited in the U.S. markets, and it's all in the T-bills, so there is no question about pricing our commodity with the US dollar, keeping the money in the US bill, spending the money at the right places jointly with the US, and have kept a very strong relation, strong alliances. All of that,
yes.
Yeah, all of that is important. And I think we used to, as a general, say, Pakistan and Saudi used to have a very common, strong friend. And I'm sure a lot of our friends whom I know, Hussein, we used to have that strong one. But honestly, the late events, since Brigadier and the 2 critical oil facility, it raises the questions. And instead of having a real evidence given to us of who did it, we had yes, we heard some condemnation. We have seen a report that says it believes that some part could have been manufactured, and so, but without really clear, maybe because they did not want to have escalation in the region, or even bringing additional level of escalation. But still, I think we remain quite strong in terms of relation to the US. we are not going to apply any shifting policy relation at this stage as long as we have that strong relation. President Trump's visit to the region, I think, was the biggest endorsement of that and how important is the relation between both sides. But we would like to see it in terms of implementation and not only transactional.
And Professor Khan, there has been a sense among some observers that the U.S. has shifted more towards India and away from Pakistan. I don't know if that's true at all. I don't know if that's the way Pakistan sees it. If it is strategic diversification then a strategic imperative for Pakistan, which would produce more agreements like this? And to what extent does Pakistan see this agreement as still within the American umbrella, or perhaps starting to create frameworks that move beyond that, unipolar reality into a multipolar world?
Well, thank you for that question. First of all, the U.S.-India relation has been evolving. I mean, not just in the recent years, but this has been evolving ever since the mid-80s, mid-80s onwards,
Yes.
So it is not something which is new. What did happen new was the 2005 nuclear agreement, and that was the basis that if India-US have the nuclear agreement, that will open up India's US strategic partnership for a very different contingency, which is vis-a-vis China and other Asian power balances. India as a net security provider on the other Asian Pacific region. And and the US side, as to the best of my knowledge, is that they were assuring Pakistan that this is not about Pakistan, So these were kind of disconnected of sorts, although geopolitics is not disconnected totally. So the US policy essentially began by dehyphenating India and Pakistan. They use the word dehyphenated. And that, the Pakistan didn't like it in the beginning because it's very, strategically speaking, South Asia is such a construct that you cannot really dehyphenate that. But in terms of policy, they try to dehyphenate in this manner. But throughout this period that I talk about, where the US-India partnership grew, the Pakistan-US relations did not diminish. It went up and down for different reasons that has been there, for nuclear issues, for counterterrorism, cooperation issues, and other related issues with the US and Pakistan strategic hiccups, if you will. But CENTCOM-Pakistan relation had never been, gone. That has been the backbone of US-Pakistan relations, until sharing military-to-military cooperation, CENTCOM is, and that continues to remain that. So I see that, as my friend is saying, that this architecture that is developed in the Gulf region, the Pakistanis see that as a compliment. They see that they have a role to play in that. And this agreement is not contrarian to that, it is actually an advancement to that. But the timing of this thing is exactly what my colleague had just said, This is a rattle, because how much is the US committed when it comes to a threat of Israel, of the kind of threat that happened in Qatar? In fact, it's important that, Israel would do anything in the region without any consideration, and the US will provide them the umbrella. And I think all countries in the Gulf, friends and foes alike, enemies, enmity alike, they are watching what's going on. And by the way, when the attack on Iran happened, there was a negotiation that was brokered by the United States before the Israelis attacked Iran. Similarly, in Qatar, what happened was that they were coming for negotiations.
Yes, indeed.
So the point is that, that it is up to Washington to let the world know what their credibility has been shaken because of the lack of, what Israel has done has taken Washington for granted, So in our international term, it's the tail that wags the dog, that the whole world is watching that. So under that agreement, this regional agreement that Saudi and Pakistan is exactly what my colleague had just said about that. And by the way, even Iranian president had endorsed this the defense agreement in the UN General Assembly. So it is not something that this agreement has been seen as a threat by anyone else. But I fully agree with Dr. Sagar that the Saudi threat perception is that what matters more when Pakistan cooperation with them actually happens, Saudi does not see a nuclear threat to them, as my colleague had just said. In my view also, I endorse that because I cannot see what kind of a threat Saudi Arabia will have, even a conventional threat from Israel or any other, in my assessment, The nature of threat is the one that is actually going to evolve,
Right.
And again, because your time is coming short, and I know you have a major question about the efficacy of nuclear deterrent or umbrella. I'm sure that's a key question that everybody wants to hear. So if you want me to answer now, I can answer, or maybe later. But
You
that's
can go right ahead and answer now.
all right. So I can answer that. This first of all, both of us are saying the same thing, that this is a sort of an exaggeration, but there is some ground about this so-called Islamic bomb that has existed from the 70s onwards because of the nature. Pakistan is the only Muslim country with the nuclear weapons, and therefore any agreement that done, it is assumed that there'll be a nuclear deterrent offer on the front. But the reality is what my colleague just said. That is not quite the case. I have not seen that Saudis ever asked for it, or there is any formal agreement that, to the best of my knowledge, between the two countries. Even if there is an understanding, it is not known of this kind. But practically speaking, I can go over the scenario for the sake of understanding what kind of cooperation Pakistan can give. If people who have been talking about that Pakistan will physically move nuclear weapons to Saudi Arabia, that is highly unlikely under any set of circumstances, given the Pakistan AQ Khan proliferation history and the nature of relationship with CENTCOM and US umbrella under which all this happens. It is really not probable that at all that kind of a thing will happen. Neither is Saudi Arabia asked. So that is one possibility. The second possibility that people talk about is essentially that Pakistan can provide umbrella by increasing the ranges of its missile systems that could cover Israel and other threats that Saudi Arabia may perceive. Now, speaking technically or in terms of capability, Pakistan can do that if they want to do that, but actually Pakistan has restrained itself now in terms of its ranges, precisely for the reason that it does not want to threaten anything beyond the Indian subcontinent region, and has repeatedly assured for exactly the same reason that it doesn't want to bite so much that it cannot chew and manufacture more threat that it can handle.
Right.
That will be a worse nightmare for Pakistan with Israel, India, and even US backing cooperation happens against Pakistan nuclear program. That's so stupid, and that'll be so counterproductive if Pakistan does that. Even if we speak professionally, that even if hypothetically Pakistan missile range can reach, that doesn't mean that it is an extended deterrence umbrella. It's just a reach. That requires a sort of a joint, that requires a sophisticated level of force, command and control agreement. This is not United States,
Right.
So it is not, the capability does not exist of the sophistication level to even do that, much less the Pakistanis would do that. What do you think of Israel would do in case if Pakistan does that? So throughout the history, and I can say this on record here, that every time the Israelis have perceived a threat from Pakistan, the Pakistanis have found ways to assure Israel through friends, particularly the United States, to assure that's not the case. And that is the reason why Israel also does not want to extend too much to include Pakistan into the threat metrics and allow India to do that. But that said, I think there's one angle that is becoming more important now, which is related to the 4-day war that has happened. You see, Israeli weapon systems have been actively involved in the 4-day crisis that happened in May. Israeli drones were effectively used by India, Arab drones. Israeli Barak air defenses were intercepting. So Israel is providing capability to India that is effectively creating security problem for Pakistan. And then Pakistan has a right to provide to its friends anything in the region, the same kind of defense cooperation with them, to provide them equipment, whether it's aircraft or missile systems, not necessarily strategic weapons, to them to do so. And Israel has to also calculate that if it is creating threat for Pakistan, how long will Pakistan patience last? I mean, that's one question that is an overarching sort of a thing. There's a third possibility is that Saudi Arabia may ask Pakistan to help them create, help Pakistan. Now, that is one possibility that I can discuss, but as my colleague has just said, it's an NPT member. There's a legality issue involved here. Will Saudi Arabia decide to do so in that case, to go the North Korean way or withdraw from NPT? That's a very different contingency, highly unlikely, but in that case, the Pakistan has the capability to do so. Whether the Saudis train in Pakistan or the Pakistanis go and train in Saudi Arabia, that's something that can be decided in the future. But there is a background. I can give you two more for the sake of record. In the 1980s and subsequently, Pakistanis have openly, under the IAEA program, done for all Muslim countries can come, scientists can come and train in Pakistan, and the Pakistanis are open to that. But that is above board, under the program that is monitored and all. And Pakistan would also not want to jeopardize its very long standing with the international IAEA agreements that it has. By the way, Pakistan is not an NPT member, so the legality issue is not quite applicable to them as the way it is to them. Israel can do anything to any country because not an NPT member, the same case. But about 10 years ago, Pakistanis pledged that they will be abiding by the Article 1, 2 of the first 1 and 2 of the NPT treaty, which means that, it will not provide assistance of the kind,
And there is cooperation with the IAEA.
With the IAEA as well as, Article 1 and 2 of the NPT, although it's not a member, but it said they will meet by obligations. Because at that time, 10 years ago, when Obama administration was wanting Pakistan, some kind of becoming a nuclear supply group, NSC membership, so Pakistan were prepared to do everything possible so as to be in good standing, given the background of AQ Khan network. So they were wanting to get into that. That was coinciding at the time when the JCPOA was also signed, and Saudi Arabia was a bit concerned about when the JCPOA was signed at the time. So it was at that 10 years time frame that there was this element about, what is Saudi Arabia thinking about Iranian getting away with nuclear weapon system, and what is the Saudi Arabian option on that? And that pressure was coming onto the Pakistanis, and that's where the Pakistanis were handling it very, very cautiously, because there was a Yemen demand and there was JCPOA all happening at the same time. So they were treading really carefully at that time, in my assessment. So that's the overarching thing. Bottom line, I don't think so the Pakistanis has the capability to provide the nuclear umbrella. Secondly, neither the intent neither has Saudi Arabia asked, in my assessment.
Right.
Sorry, sir, for the long thing, but I wanted to clarify that.
Well, no, thank you very much. And I'd ask Dr. Sagar to comment on the same set of questions. Although you said in the past, earlier in this hour, a great deal about Saudi Arabia's lack of interest in this. However, how would you react to what Professor Khan has said?
I think I agree with what you have said, that Saudi Arabia has no intention in terms of any militarization capability in the nuclear side. I think the myth and the old story and the perception that has been created before, that an Islamic bomb and a Saudi long-range Chinese missile can have a Pakistani nuclear warhead, and so this is a myth, and yes, it has no reality, it has no basis, it has nothing to do with that one. At the same time, I think what Saudi would like to push all its friends, the US and the EU and the other member and so on, so is to try to push always for a peaceful coexistence, for de-escalation. We have endorsed all the de-escalation between the US and Iran, and we wanted to see that sort of de-escalation that will lead to a peaceful region, because then the whole region can prosper in that one. And by the way, there are some of our academic colleagues, they're talking about why not Turkey join this Pakistan-Saudi agreement, why not Indonesia join in that one. I think this is also a far-fetched, because Turkey is a member of NATO, and they cannot be part of any defense arrangement without the prior approval of NATO. Indonesia, it's an important country, it has a large population, but at the same time, I think maybe if we talk about under the OIC, an Islamic peace force, and that peace force can be used in conflict zone, in some area where they will maintain peace. That could be an idea, but that's also need a lot of preparation, and I need a lot of agreements to be in place.
Yeah, I'm going to ask both of you one final question, because we're almost out of time. And this is the best one from several viewers, so I'm collapsing it into one question. And it's also the last question I wanted to ask both of you as we're approaching the end of the hour. I want to thank both of you for your cooperation here and your gracious presence. You've been most generous with your time. And I'll ask both of you if, in your view, this new Saudi-Pakistani agreement was done with what was the involvement of the United States in the negotiations? Did they have any part in it? Were they informed of it? Did they approve, not approve, or was it simply not a part of it at all? And this, although it does not contradict American interests, we've established that, is it anything that the United States was engaged in, proactively, yes, no, maybe, or something like this? How do you think that? Yeah. And that's my final question. Dr. Sagar, I'll begin with you.
Yeah. I think Saudi did inform the U.S. before the visit of the Prime Minister of Pakistan. Both the DOD or Defense Department, War Department, you call it now, have been also notified. The State Department has been also notified. So I think both have been notified, and also giving it within its own context. So it's not really an exaggeration or anything like this that can represent a threat or undermine the U.S. presence or the U.S. relation in the region. So from that angle, I think it has been notification from the Saudi side to the, and also soon after we signed, the Prime Minister of Pakistan and Chief of Staff did visit the White House and the Washington, and I think all the clarification have been made by them also when they visit Washington.
And there have been no objections, correct?
Yeah, no, there was no objection, because once you look at it as a support to the stability and the security of the region and not offensive, this is not an offensive agreement, neither to be used against anybody or to escalate against any country and so.
Yeah. And Professor Khan, I will thank you very much.
I think
ask you the same question.
I agree with that, because it is quite likely, though I don't have full information, that Pakistan would have equally informed the US, of this particular and as you mentioned that, the newborn homie between America and Pakistan that has begun, the Trump administration, they don't want to do anything which is without their knowledge. And by the way, just as a record, to my knowledge, just 2 days before this agreement was signed, or 3 days before, the CENTCOM chief was visiting Riyadh. He was there. So I mean, that is an indication that it's very obvious that he was in knowledge and was done. So I don't. Yeah. So the answer is.
So there's some degree of coordination and no objections.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank both of you very much, Dr. Sagar, Professor Khan. You've been most generous with your time. Thank you very, very much for joining us. And to our viewers, thank you. Good afternoon, good evening, no matter where you are. And please join us again next time for our next excellent AGSI webinar. And we'll see you all again soon. Thank you very much, gentlemen.